Hey, what's going on, you guys? Your boy from Only Boy Reactions. If you haven't, you can hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and also on SoundCloud, where I'm putting out music of my own. Also, I'm a stand-up comedian, so I'll let you guys know if I have a show coming up in the description below. Besides, for that, when we reach 500 subscribers, there will be a giveaway for $50 Amazon gift card, so stay tuned. Aren't you sick and tired of the list? Well, I am. Everybody seems to have their specific opinion on the Black Mirror episodes. One of the greatest and best shows to come out in the past century. Kind of an homage to the Twilight Zone and kind of an updated version of it. It's such a good show, and people seem to ruin lists by ranking the worst to best episode. And today, no more. I'm gonna put out my own list of the worst to best episodes because, frankly, my opinion is, let's just say it, word to God, okay? What I say pretty much is right. It's pretty much factual. So without further ado, guys, I'm ranking my worst to best episodes of Black Mirror. Let's do this. Number 19, The Entire History of You. I really like the premise, and it's too bad that that's pretty much all I really like. The entire episode is really slow, it's really tired. It takes place in this future where everybody is able to see everything and watch everything, and they're able to pretty much record everything that's going around them all the time, and you can always look back and see pretty much everything that's been going on in your life. A really interesting concept that's not so far off from kind of how we're living today, where I can see the future going. That's what's so great about this show, is that it's so good at kind of showing us what can be possible. And the sad thing about this is I really like this concept, but for the most part, it's a really slow, really boring. The characters aren't really that engaging, and I really couldn't get into it. Number 18, Be Right Back. Another episode with a really great premise, but again, executed, I think, really poorly. It's really boring. That is the problem. It's about this woman who unfortunately loses her husband, and to get over it, she contacts this company that allows you to, that downloads all of somebody who's passed away's personal information and kind of concocts this robotic entity that pretty much helps you cope with a dead loved one. Again, a really interesting concept, but again, I think poorly executed. It's really boring. It's not that interesting. I'll say this. The Entire History of You, I can't really see any redeeming qualities in this one. There are just a couple of really just sad moments, so I'll give them that. But besides for that, I think for the most part, it falls flat. Number 17, Hated in the Nation. You like buddy cop movies? You like Black Mirror? Why don't we put these together? Honestly, I kind of like the concept, seeing what a buddy cop movie would look like if Black Mirror directed it, and we got a pretty standard, not that interesting story about a virus that seems to be going around, these two cops trying to figure out what's happening and all these things being thrown into the mix. Nah, it falls kind of flat. Number 1, the two women cops, they're really not believable. Something about them, maybe they're not great actresses, or maybe with what they're working with, but they're just not believable. I would never really expect these people to be high-level cops. They just kind of seem like housewives, and that's not to say that because they're women, just they're not that believable. But besides for that, the rest of the episode is pretty slow. It's not that interesting. I'll say this, the last 10-15 minutes does get really good, and that's the unfortunate part. It gets really good up until a part where it finally ends. So for the most part, it's really a boring, not that engaging episode that I wished really could have been better. Number 16, Archangel. This is where I think the show gets just to be a little bit better, taking place in this world where you're able to inject a camera into your kid, so you're able to pretty much see everything that she's going through, and you're able to block out anything that you don't want to see. A really interesting concept, and what they do with it is okay. I think they just touch upon some really interesting ideas, but I think as I said, they just touch upon it. They don't really get into too much of what can happen. I think the ending is really powerful, but I think it takes a lot of time to get to those really interesting places, and I think for what they did, I think they could have just done, they only really touched the surface. 15, Krokodil. This has got to be the darkest from all the episodes. Taking place with a woman who is hiding a secret, and she'll do anything to keep it away from people. This is just dark, and I won't get too much into it, but the ending's got to be the darkest from many of the other Black Mirror episodes. But that might be its problem. It's really dark, but there's not that many interesting things about it, just kind of to shock you and to show you how dark they can get. Again, I like dark, but I think there needs to be just a bit more. They seem to just rely on it. So for the most part, I think it kind of loses. I think they could have taken this they could have taken this maybe in a different direction. I think if we knew just a little bit about the main character, I think it would have been interesting, but we don't really know much about her, and seeing her go through all this, it's very hard for us to connect because we don't really know much about her childhood and her background, so I think that's kind of one of the faults. But if you're looking for a dark episode, this is definitely one you should check out. Number 14, National Anthem, the first episode of the Black Mirror show. I think this is actually the perfect episode to start off. The story revolves around a prime minister who's being blackmailed, and if he doesn't do what the blackmailer says, they're going to kill the victim that they've captured. And I won't go too much into spoilers, but this is a perfect episode to watch to see if you really enjoy this show. It really gauges you, and you can decide whether you like this idea and this concept or you don't. This is kind of it touches upon and has enough uncomfortable moments that really get you to think. Enjoy this episode, and I think a perfect episode for the first one. Number 13, the Waldo Moment. This seems to be put like on the lower part of people's lists, and I think when it came out that might have been the case, but in today's day, it is really interesting to go back and watch it. It revolves around a cartoon character who the company wants to promote, so they enter this cartoon character into a political race. Interesting enough, and again, touches on some really interesting ideas that it's so funny to watch nowadays in the whole political climate, what's going on. It kind of predicted a little bit what was going to happen, and I think a few years ago people watching it might have not been that interested, but nowadays I think it's a lot more of an interesting episode. Not the best episode, and there definitely are some faults, and we don't really get too much into the main character, which I think might be a big one of its problems, but for what we got, a really interesting and brutally honest episode. 12, Sanjana Peril. People put this as their favorite, and one of the reasons why I wanted to make a list is to say that I thought this episode was okay. Actually, I thought it was kind of boring for at least the first half. Visually stunning, and I think it won some awards, and I can understand why people really like this episode, but for me, I think there's a lot of problems, and it kind of falls flat. Taking place in kind of this dystopian virtual reality world. It's not really super explained, but it's definitely an interesting concept where these two women find themselves interacting with one another, and it's a hard episode to really explain, and I think there are some really interesting concepts, but again, it takes a while to get there, and I think the relationship is not that interesting. I really didn't get into this, and if you're not going to get into the relationship, that is a big part of the episode, and for me, I just didn't enjoy these characters. I didn't find them that interesting. I don't know, man. I think I've known people similar to these type of people, and I'm not really like them. That may be it. But just not enough interesting characters. But I do like when you actually get to meet them for real. Those characters I actually like. But it takes a while to get there. And again, visually stunning, but for the most part, it kind of falls flat on just how interesting the characters are and kind of how boring it is for the first half. Number 11, Metalhead. It's interesting that I'm putting this in front of Sanjana Peril. It's colorful and really interesting to look at. Metalhead is the complete opposite. It's all in black and white, and it takes place in this dystopian future where robots have taken over the world. And that's really about it. It's just about a woman running away and trying to get away from these robots. A really simple episode that at first I didn't think I would like, but as it progresses, I like it. I just think it's a really simple concept that there's not that much to it. Why I put this above Sanjana Peril is where Sanjana Peril takes a while to actually get interesting. This only takes a few minutes, and it throws you into the mix, and it's just kind of an exciting and kind of thriller type of episode. Again, there's not that much to this, and I'm not going to say that I love the episode, but there's enough in it that I was engaged until the end. Number 10, Hang the DJ. I think this is where the show starts to get good, not just decent. And it's about this world where this dating app tells you exactly how long you're going to last with the person that you go out with. A really interesting concept, and again, it's definitely a really interesting concept, and they do enough with it. And again, with Sanjana Peril, I didn't really like the relationship, and I didn't really like these characters. In this episode, I really do, and that's what holds this episode together. These two people I really like, and I really hope that they get together. Kind of a romantic, comedy-ish type of episode, but done in a really interesting and only Black Mirror type of way. Really enjoyed this episode, and with an ending that I think is really great. 9, 15 million merits. This is probably, I would say, one of the most technological episodes. It takes place in this world where you're surrounded by technology, and the only way to break out of this entire world is if you enter this talent show and you win. Again, a weird concept and episode, and hard for me to explain, but I think they definitely throw a lot of really interesting concepts at you, mainly dealing, I think, with reality TV and the way that people are so obsessed with social media. And it kind of hit me hard because, again, I'm the social media personality myself. Definitely a really visually interesting idea, and it's very hard to explain, so I won't go too much into it, but I think definitely an episode that you should check out. Number 8, Man Against Fire. Another episode that people seem to put on their lower list, but for me, I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed the concepts and the ideas taking place in this world where creatures or aliens, again, we're not sure, we kind of find that out in the middle, are taking over, and the army is going after them and trying to kill them. And I like how this episode progresses and how dark it gets, and how it really touches upon some interesting ideas about the army and about who we're fighting and all of that stuff. And a really interesting episode with a really great twist that I happen to really enjoy, and a really dark and gritty ending. Number 7, Whitebeard. This is where the show gets from good to great. This is where I felt it was super similar to The Twilight Zone. I felt that rush after I watched this episode. This woman wakes up not knowing where she is or who she is, doesn't have any memory, and people seem to follow her and are chasing after her as she tries to figure out what's going on. A perfect episode, I think, if you're trying to get that Twilight Zone vibe. I mean, from the beginning to end, you're trying to figure out what's going on, and with a twist that I will dare spoil. But again, a really fun and interesting episode that keeps you on your toes. Number 6, Nosedive. Probably the most well-written and put-together episode taking place in this world where everybody is graded according to how they act towards one another. People get a 3.4, a 4.4 on pretty much how Uber drivers are graded. Really interesting, and again, it shows kind of on it's such a great social commentary on where we're kind of headed and where we can go, and and seeing how this is not so far off and how a lot of us act today. And Bryce Dallas, I'm not a huge fan of, but in this episode she does a really good job of playing this insecure woman who's just trying to get by and do her best. I think this is a really great episode that is such good social commentary, and is one that, and the ending is probably one of my favorites from any of the episodes. So definitely go check that one out. Alright, we're getting to the top 5. This is where the show gets from great to freaking awesome. Number 5, Shut Up and Dance. About a kid who's being blackmailed by this anonymous person, and if he doesn't do what this person says, they're going to release a tape of things that he did, and he's constantly running around trying to do certain things, and in the mix he meets up with the people kind of in the same boat, and it's a really gritty and dark episode. I really like this episode because you're kind of going back and forth on a lot of these characters. You're really conflicted because some of them have done some really bad things, but again, they're just humans, you know, and the episode really explores that with an ending that is, I think, the darkest episode. I think is one of the grittiest and darkest endings from any of the other episodes. It's really good. It totally threw me off, and it totally threw me off. Definitely an exceptional and amazing episode. Number 4, the USS Callister. This is just a fun episode. It revolves around a guy who is really pushed around, and he really can't stick up for himself, and the only place he has control is in this virtual reality video game. And we learn later on that the characters that he has in this game actually have consciousness, and they have to find a way to escape from this video game. A really fun and interesting episode, and a lot of people put this on their favorite list, and I can see why. It's just a really adventurous, interesting episode that explores some really fun ideas, and really has you sitting on the edge of your seat wondering and hoping that these characters will get out alive. Number 3, Black Museum. I would say this is probably the most Twilight Zone feeling I've ever gotten from any of the other episodes. Revolving around a woman whose car breaks down, she ends up visiting this museum called the Black Museum, which is a museum filled with technology that was used for certain things and were banned because of what they did. And this curator that we meet tells over all these stories, and it's super engaging, and you're always and it keeps you on your seat, and visually stunning, and it keeps you interested to the end, where it really throws you off. It really gives you a really interesting ending. Just a really gritty and really interesting episode that I loved from beginning to end. Number 2, White Christmas. Man, is this episode good. This episode is incredible, revolving around a couple of stories, but mainly around this character played by Jon Hamm, who finds himself in this hut, and he engages with this other guy that he's with, and they kind of swap stories and talk a little bit about how they ended up in this small cabin type place. And again, I won't dare spoil it you, but I think this one gave me the most anxiety. It touches upon like consciousness and being real and not being real. A really trippy episode that if you were ever to take drugs, which I'm not saying you should, this I think would be the episode to do. Just an incredible episode. All the stories coming together to fit super well at the end. And my favorite episode of Black Mirror is Playtest. The closest to a horror episode, but this is what I love of Black Mirror. It's got thriller, it's got dark, it's got humor, it's got engaging and interesting concepts that are, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat with an ending that has to be by far the best ending in Black Mirror, revolving around a guy who ends up touring Europe and realizes he needs some money, so he signs up for this new testing game program. Man, was this episode an anxiety-ridden, dark episode that, again, I won't dare spoil the ending, but is just has to be my favorite episode. Has everything that I love in it. And if you're a horror fan, this is, I said before, the closest to a horror episode, and I think, for the most part, the best episode of Black Mirror. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you agree with this list, or if you think that I if you think I'm totally wrong, and which episodes should have really been the best, and which ones should have been the worst, tell me why in the comment section below, and make sure to subscribe, because when we get to 500 subscribers, there will be a giveaway for a $50 Amazon gift card. Stay tuned and enjoy the rest of your day, guys.